Look, there have been some terrible terrorist attacks against Indians in Kashmir in recent weeks. And as a result, last night we saw India fire missiles and send fighter jets into Pakistani-controlled territory across the line of control overnight. And Pakistan's also hit back at this. Here's the latest on the situation from NBC News.
That is one of 3 cities in Pakistan struck by 24 missiles launched by India, according to Pakistan's military. India describing them as strikes on terrorist camp. Now, Pakistan says the strikes killed at least 8 people, including at least 2 kids, and injured 35 people. Pakistan's Air Force says they have already responded by shooting down 3 Indian jets.
Let's bring in Malcolm Davis, who's Senior Analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, joining us live from Canberra. Thanks for joining us, Malcolm. The line of control in Kashmir, this is a flashpoint, of course, has been for many, many decades. Just how worrying, though, is this clash, seeing the militaries involved, 2 nuclear powers, of course?
Exactly. And I think that any time you have a situation like this where India has retaliated for a terrorist attack that seems to have been had some sort of Pakistani involvement, you have the potential for an escalatory cycle. So in other words, India has attacked Pakistan today in terms of it hitting those terrorist sites in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, as well as Pakistan itself. The Pakistani government in Islamabad will now be under tremendous pressure to retaliate. And so therefore, I think you could see that retaliation happening in the next 36 hours. And then India would then be under pressure to respond somehow. So there is that risk of an escalatory cycle that intensifies the tensions and increases the risks.
Just reacquainting myself with the terrain today, just when you look at where all this is unfolding, where the line of control and this contentious territory is, it's so close to the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, which I think just increases the tension and the risk of mistakes here.
Exactly, and when you look at how Pakistan sees its defence doctrine, it doesn't have the ability really to defend Pakistani territory in depth, and that's why it's tended to rely heavily on tactical nuclear weapons for defending Pakistan in the event of a major Indian attack into Pakistan. We're not talking about that sort of scenario here where you have the Indian army invading Pakistan. But we are talking about the prospect of tit-for-tat retaliation between both sides that could generate increasing tension. So it is a serious situation, and I would hope that both India and Pakistan take a step back from the brink and see the wisdom of de-escalating things.
Donald Trump was asked about this today. Here's what he had to say.
It's a shame we just heard about it, just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. They've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
Yeah, to what extent can other nations and international pressure keep Pakistan and India restrained in this situation, or is it something they really just settle themselves? And further to that, can non-state actors exploit this now? Can there be terrorist groups that deliberately inflame tensions by launching attacks now?
Look, I think certainly you will see the US, you will see China, potentially some of the European partners of India engage diplomatically to try and de-escalate things, to try and create some sort of agreement that allows an off-ramp for both sides to de-escalate. So that's almost certain to happen. In terms of your point about non-state actors, I think that's a possibility that India would need to be on guard for. There are many actors that are involved in the Kashmir-Jammu dispute that might see this as an opportune time to strike. But it's not certain that would happen. And I think that what everyone will be focusing on is making sure that both India and Pakistan recognise the value of de-escalation and avoiding this escalatory cycle that could then lead to extreme scenarios where maybe nuclear weapons come into play.
Indeed. Now, briefly, we are nearly out of time, but while I've got you, got to get your thoughts on Xi Jinping turning up in Moscow, a summit with Vladimir Putin in coming days. The eyes of the world will be on this. Australia, among others, ought to be deeply concerned about this new alliance, if you want to call it that.
Look, what you are seeing emerge, and I think very clearly is present, is an axis of authoritarian states comprising China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, all working together, all coordinating against the West. So actions that Russia is taking against NATO in the form of hybrid warfare are being exploited by China, and so on and so forth. And you have now, obviously, the Victory Day celebrations in Moscow to celebrate the ending of the war on the Western Front in the Second World War. Xi is in town for that, but he's also meeting with Putin to strengthen that axis of authoritarian states. And what we are facing is a very serious global challenge from Moscow and Beijing in particular that is directed against democracy as a system of governance and against our Western liberal values. And so this is one aspect of a global confrontation between democracy on the one hand and authoritarianism on the other. And Australia should be worried about this as well.
Yeah, well expressed, Malcolm. Thanks so much for joining us. Malcolm Davis there, who's the senior analyst at ASPI in Canberra. Great worry, isn't it? It's a dangerous world, and we're a country still running around with diesel submarines, and we don't reckon we're up to running nuclear power. Nothing to be worried about, eh?